Welcome to part 5. With the setData and getData functions in place, let's go ahead and add a couple additional functions to our template object. The first thing that I want to do is I want to add a new function that I'm going to call redirect. It's going to be a simple wrapper for the header function so we can redirect to different files within our application. So pretty similar to the load function above. It's going to be function redirect. We're going to provide it a URL to redirect to, and we're going to use the header function like this. So I'll test this in a little bit. It should work fine. Now that that's completed, there's another area that I want to focus on. I want to be able to get and set alerts. And the way I think of it, alerts are temporary variables that are set once. They display to the user in whatever page the user loads next, and then they disappear. So it could be something simple like you're working with a form, there are a couple of required values, and the user forgets to fill in one of the required values. So when the form reloads and the form is validated, an alert appears saying, please fill in all required fields. To follow along with that example, maybe when the form submits successfully, another message will pop up saying, thank you for submitting the form, we'll contact you soon, or something similar to that. So these are going to be temporary variables. They will appear once and then disappear forever. So I want to start off by setting a couple different alert types. Like I mentioned earlier, there could be error messages, it could be success messages, etc. So let's start with a new function, and I'm going to call it set alert types, like this. And we're going to access a new variable that is going to be private alert types. Now within the setAlertTypes function, we're going to do this alert types equals types. So we're going to be using this setAlertTypes function later in our application. The next step is we want to create a function that actually sets the alerts themselves. So we're going to do a function setAlert, and we're going to pass in two variables. We're going to pass in a value for the alert, and then we're also going to pass in a type, but we're also going to default so the type can be left blank if we just want to use the default type. And the default type is going to be this alert types at 0. And I'll show you how this works in a minute. Okay, so within the setAlert function, we're going to use a session variable. And the reason we're using a session variable is we need to keep this data between pages. And the easiest way to do that is to use a session variable that will be able to be accessed between pages. So session, and we're going to give it the key of type, and then we're going to leave this blank. So when we set a session variable, it's going to automatically be set to the type, and then 0, 1, 2, etc. The server will set the second variable, and we're going to set that to value. So that's that. Maybe I need to explain this line a little bit better. Basically what we're doing here is we're creating a 2D array. For example, we could have, what's the best way to explain this? We could access it by session. Let's say we're setting a success message. We could access it like this. So it would be success at 0 the first time we set an alert. with an alert type of success. Second time would be success at 1, at 2, etc. So we're using a 2D array, which is basically an array of arrays. So that's that portion. Now we need to do a function to get our alerts. And basically what we need to do is we need to go through our session variable, loop through each item in the array, and return it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a temporary variable that I'm going to call data. This is a variable that exists only within the getAlerts function, and it has nothing to do with this particular data, which you access using this data. And we're going to use a for each function. So for each this alert types as alert. So we're going to use the alert types that we set earlier, and it's going to go through each of the alert types and display them. And then if is set so this is going to make sure that our session variable is set for this particular kind of alert, because we may have multiple alert types, but we may not need to display all of them. For example, in a couple minutes I'm going to be showing you that we're going to set up a success, a warning, and an error alert types, but we also want to make sure when we're displaying these that there's actually something to display. So if the session with the correct alert type is set, we're going to use another for each loop. Like so. And each time it loops, we're going to add to the data variable, like this. We're going to add a list item with a class, and within that class it's going to hold the alert type, which is alert, which we set up here. And then we're going to add the value, which we set within this loop. And then we're going to close out the list item. And then after we've looped through this session variable with the specific alert type that we've set, we want to unset that variable. So it's only going to appear once and then it'll disappear. We do that like so. And then after it's gone through all the loops, we're going to return the data variable. So to go through this briefly one more time, the way this works is we set a list of alert types, and we go through each of those alert types. When we want to display these alerts, we go through each of those individual alert types. If the session variable with the specific alert type that we want is set, we will loop through each item in that session array, and we'll display a list item that holds the class with the alert type and the value for the alert. After that loops, we unset the session variable, and we continue doing that for each different alert type. And once we've gone through the 2 loops, we return our data. So let me show you an actual example of this, how it works, and I think you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So I believe our functions are all in place. Let's go back to login.php. And to use sessions, we need to start with session start. Like this. We've created our template. Now let's go ahead and set our default values. So set alert, or set my alert types, excuse me. And we're going to pass in an array. And we have a couple different values that we want to pass in. I'm going to create alert types for success, warning, and error. There we go. So let's preview this. Just make sure everything's working properly. And we have an issue, 58.